GDPR is the new regulation for privacy, and it has to be very well understood that the general regulation for data protection is not in and on itself a privacy law, it's a data protection law.
This is Carmela Troncoso, a professor of the IC School at EPFL, and what we are discussing today is the regulation that caused the avalanche of emails you probably received a few months ago. This regulation, called GDPR, is a law of the European Union on data protection.
What it actually does is to create a good framework for when data is collected so that it is actually treated in the correct way. So it focuses a lot on consent. I can only collect data that you have given me the consent to do. It focuses on purpose. I can only collect the data for a given purpose, and I can only use the data for this particular purpose. And it focuses a lot on transparency. I need to explain to you how I'm using the data.
Okay, this made me frown a little. How can a company explain to a random client the processing of his data?
So transparency by the law means that you have the right as a data subject, as the owner of the data and the person that, the individual that the data refers to, you have the right to go to any company and demand to know how your data is being used. Okay. And they have to tell you, I took this piece of data, I use it for this purpose, and now I'm showing you this advertisement because I process the data in this way. In this sense, machine learning is also the hugest new challenge, because who knows what the machine learning algorithm does with the data when it goes through the training and the prediction. And it's actually a big challenge for GDPR compliance to be able to explain to the customer how decisions were made regarding the data when in the middle there is the machine learning box that many times we don't really know what it did.
Leaving this difficulty aside, there's a last important condition imposed by GDPR, which is
accountability. If I misuse the data, I should be held accountable. And something goes wrong, I would have a fine, I would have to tell my customers, I would be held accountable. But in none of these words, we have actually seen this idea of minimizing the amount of data or minimizing the amount of trust. Actually, the data controller, which is the legal figure of the person that collects the data and processes it, is actually trusted to do this thing in a correct way.
So one trouble with GDPR is that it still very much relies on trusting the companies that will process our data. So GDPR probably shouldn't be regarded as the end solution to privacy concerns.
It's a first step, but not exactly the thing that maybe does the boon. But it's very nice because also what GDPR is doing is putting a lot of burden on people that have the data, because now you have more conditions for compliance, which actually also makes people rethink the fact that they maybe not want the data, because actually not having the data may be a better thing to do. And it's very funny because now to US companies, which are not European, but if they touch any data for European, then they are subject to GDPR. Then they have to put in place all of this full bureaucracy apparatus that comes behind to prove compliance. So there was yet another American company that actually what they said is, we can offer you a service that actually blocks any European from accessing your service, so you will never touch them and you don't have the data, and then you don't need to be compliant.
This is actually a great thing because it will give incentives to companies to implement solutions that don't require the storing of our data and thus potential leaks of our data.
And then privacy technologies can play a big role on still enable you to have functionality while you don't have the data. In this sense, privacy technologies try to go beyond this thing to actually provide a much stronger concept of privacy that the regulation tries to do, and many times we just present it as the ultimate data protection, which is when you don't have the data.
So the incentives may encourage the use of better privacy technologies, but this is not all. There may be another nice side effect.
Also, the big push for transparency is gonna show more and more and more what's going on with the data behind the curtains, and that may push also users to demand better, really privacy-preserving services.
Now, it is a big challenge academically speaking. There are a lot of research works that are dealing with privacy and how to provide good recommendation while respecting privacy.
Like there is a lot of research about how do we define privacy from sociologists, from lawyers, from a lot of kind of humanities disciplines, but also from a technical perspective is very difficult.